author of The Prepared Investor. All right, George, what do you make of the sell-off? Was it as more about the oil price war or the coronavirus, or just a really bad combination of the two?
The oil was the tipping point. The coronavirus would have kept the market going down for several more months, I think. But when the Saudis and Russians decided to take it to us, that exacerbated it tremendously. Russia is taking great pleasure at trying to bankrupt a lot of our oil and gas shale companies and sending the U.S. economy into a tailspin. So that was the tipping point. That pushed us off the cliff.
So that's the agenda, to try and drive the U.S. shale producers out of business. What is the level that oil drops to then justify these oil producers no longer being able to run their rigs?
Well, they're already below the price they need to break even, so they're all in distress, every single one of them that focuses on oil. So they're going to have to do dramatic cuts to their drilling program, and they're going to have to hoard their cash flow, and many of them may have to cut their dividends as well. They're in the soup in a big way.
Do you anticipate this to continue? Because this is also hurting Russia severely.
Russia has $586 billion in reserves right now, so they're going to play the long game, and they're going to watch other people suffer, and Russia tends to enjoy that. They have revealed themselves again as a very clear enemy of the United States, but that we have to engage with, so it's very difficult.
All right, let's talk about the political aspect here. Of course, there's a lot of concern that with the toxicity in Washington, it will be really tough to get some kind of bipartisan action together to stem this. We heard from President Trump earlier this evening saying that he intends to try and pass a measure that would include payroll tax cuts, paid sick leave, as well as perhaps some other measures to bolster some of the industries hardest hit. Do you see that being successful, firstly, in actually making it through a very divided Congress?
Well, it pox on both the political parties if it doesn't get through Congress. It's so obvious we need to do something on the fiscal side as well as the monetary side. And I'm worried about the Fed, because at this point the Fed is kind of pushing on a string. There's not a whole lot the Fed can do about a virus. It will cut again. On the fiscal side, I think it's about a half cup full. I'm glad he's proposed that, and I expect it to go through the Congress very quickly, but we need a lot more than that. These are extreme times, and we need extreme measures for the American people.
Well, you could argue, George, that a Fed rate cut isn't going to help anyway, considering where we are, and that, in fact, the move that they had last week to cut by half a percentage point created more panic than calm in the market. So that was not only a mistake in terms of sentiment, but also a mistake in terms of reducing the weaponry at its disposal.
Well, the timing was very suspect. They should have done it at their next meeting instead of an emergency cut. It set the markets into a tailspin. But if I were the Fed, I would do everything. I would throw the kitchen sink at this. I would cut rates down to zero again, and I would start quantitative easing as well. Use every tool in the toolbox, because this is a serious situation. And if you let it get out of control, we move into a deep recession rather than a shallow recession we can pull out of quickly.
All right, let's bring in Chris Mansky. He's the author of The Prepared Investor. Chris, were you prepared for this carnage today?
I don't think anybody was ready for the depth of today's movement. When when we look at what your other guest was just saying, with the combination of both the jab from the coronavirus and the hook from the Russians and the Saudis having their disagreement, it really hit hard.
So, Chris, what's the move here? Are there potential buying opportunities that the sell-off presents, in your opinion?
Certainly there are. You can look at sectors that everyone can understand why they're suffering and see the top players in those sectors as not disappearing anytime soon. So if you're looking at specific companies, it would be, things that are household names, and they're not weak. They're not suffering in the way that some of the smaller players are.
Are you buying anything right now, Chris?
Well, we made a big purchase of Exxon. Wish us luck.
All right, George, what about you? Are there certain sectors or even companies that make sense to get in on at this level?
I think it's time to get started for investors that have subpar exposure to the markets right now. I would focus on the heavyweights in the safe stocks. I would focus on Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, Walmart, some of these great American brands, McDonald's, that aren't inexpensive, but they're safe. They have great balance sheets, and they're going to make it through this. And for people with very strong stomachs like me, I would propose midstream oil and gas stocks that have huge yields and move oil and gas around. They're like a toll road. They just pay a fee to move the oil and gas around, so they're much less volatile and have much better balance sheets than the producers themselves. So I'd look at that.
Well, you certainly need a strong stomach to handle these volatile swings. Thank you so much, George C. and Chris Mansky. Appreciated. All right, well, finally tonight, country music legend Dolly Parton